Heavenly Father, we just thank you for this nation. We thank you for everybody here, Lord. We just pray for your blessings on this county, Lord. We just pray for your guidance, and we just pray for your wisdom, Lord, and we thank you for all you do. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag.
Roll call and termination of quorum. Madam Secretary.
Jim Averwater. Jeff Phillips. Mike Cush. Lee Bogle. Here. Charlotte P. Here. Trey Gooch.
Here.
Jim Thompson.
Here.
Michael Shirley.
Here.
Jason Beavers. Here. Hattis Reed.
Here.
We have a quorum.
We do have a quorum. Well, now don't have any minutes, I believe, so we won't need an approval of minutes. Public comment period.
Nobody signed up for that, Mr. Chairman.
No one was signed up, so we'll move into items withdrawn or deferred.
Well, I will call your attention to, sorry. Oh, sorry. Yes, I will call your attention. There was one item that commissioners will recall was pulled off the agenda. You'll see there are two items, so the agenda is correct. There was a third item that was on there originally. That was for the what is called the Project Spring. This was for a development at Manchester Pike and Epps Mill Road area. That was pulled off the agenda early last week. So I did run into a couple people who were here for that since I've been here this evening. So I just want to make sure everybody knows that that is off the agenda tonight. But those two items on there are still on the agenda tonight.
Thank you, sir. We'll go into our new business, starting with A, rezoning, zoning ordinance, amendment request. Just a reminder that all rezoning and regulation amendment requests will be considered at the April 17th, 2025 Board of Commissioners meeting unless deferred or withdrawn by the Planning Commission or the applicant. Moving to item 1, which is Brian Sullivan, REZ 25004, location 8912 and 8954 Lascassas Pike. The commissioner is Stephen Piercy in District 2. Size of site is approximately 13 acres. Tax map is 62, parcel 104, entire tract. Tax map 62, parcel 102, approximately 2.5 acres. The existing zoning is residential low density, and proposed zoning is agricultural residential. Mr. DeMasi.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you, and good evening, everyone. As you stated, the applicant would like to rezone these properties. They want to rezone the entirety of 8912 Lascassas Pike and just a portion of 8954. You'll see that there is a copy of the concept plan in your agenda packets on your iPads. So that portion will be combined with 8912, which is where the applicant's house is located. They would like to zone that to agricultural residential to establish a dog obedience and training/boarding business. The applicant has included an exhibit. Again, it shows this. This is not a plan development application, so they're not bound by the concept plan, but this does give you an idea of what he wants to do on the property. The business that he wants to run is what we would define as a kennel, which is classified as animal care and veterinarian services in our zoning ordinance. It's not allowed as either a minor or major home-based business, nor is it allowed in the RL district, which is what they're currently zoned. It is, however, allowed in the AR zone by special exception. So he understands if this is approved tonight and gets approved through the Board of Commissioners next month, that he will have to make a subsequent application to the Board of Zoning Appeals for a special exception. As far as access, parking, and landscaping, everything else is concerned, this is a pretty straightforward application. I will say that should this be approved, the Board of Zoning Appeals can put additional standards on things like additional parking, landscaping, screening, those kind of things. We do feel that this is consistent with the recommendations of the plan. This really is a downzoning, again, going from residential low density to AR. So from that standpoint, the zoning does not approve the business. So in and of itself, the zoning of the property really shouldn't have any kind of an effect on the properties in the area. And the applicant is present, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Commissioners, questions, comments for the staff? I think Mr. DeMasi's mic was going in and out. Just to let you know, we are having problems with the sound system here in the chamber. Hopefully next month we might have that taken care of.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner?
do you know if the neighbors have been notified of this change? And
Well, as far as if the applicants have spoken to them, I'm not entirely sure. He can answer that question. Now, we did follow our notification protocols like we do for all rezoning applications. So we did notify property owners within 1,000 feet. I don't recall getting any phone calls on this application.
Other questions?
Is the house, is there a house at 8954 above where they're going to put the barn?
Yes, sir, there is. Their plan is to divide the back portion of 8954, combine it with 8912, and then the house would just be used for, I believe he said, rental purposes.
Is it a, I couldn't really hear. Is it going to be a rental? Is that a rental house for them?
They own both properties. I believe that's what he's going to use it for, yes.
We're having technical difficulties, I think is what they call that. Let's see if we can swap something out.
Is that better? Test, test. Is that better? I'll just kind of mosey on over here when I'm talking.
Mr. Chair,
Okay.
the proposed parking area in front of the new building, how many cars will that hold? Is that still to be determined?
Looking at it right now, it's difficult to say exactly how many that'll hold. Now, this would just be a residential use of the property. It would still be a residential type classification. We'll make sure that they've got adequate parking, but this is kind of what I was going to a moment ago when I said the BZA could, if this is approved, could look at this and say, hey, make sure you have parking enough for X amount of folks. This will be a very large property in the sense that if they needed to provide some extra parking, I don't think it would be difficult to do that. It won't necessarily have to be built up to like a commercial standard as we'd see in like a commercial grade parking lot or anything like that, but I'm sure they've got adequate room for their clientele to come in and out.
So it wouldn't be required to be a dustless surface. It could be gravel.
Well, not necessarily. It could be, yes. It could be a gravel type base for this, yes.
Other questions? If not, I'll ask for the applicant to come forward or their representative. Good evening. We'll ask that you just identify yourself, give us your name and address, and talk to the commissioners.
Hey, good evening. My name is Brian Sullivan. This is my wife, Julie. We are the owners of the properties at 8912 and 8954. And I think Doug did a very good job explaining it, but I definitely would be willing to answer any questions. I think just before I open that up to your question, Mr. Shirley, the parking is planned to be about 10 cars, but as Doug mentioned, if anything comes out of the further meetings, we would accommodate that as well. But we're thinking about 10 is what we would need as a maximum.
Mr. Shirley?
Are you all going to be doing like trials and like agility like trials or obedience trials or anything?
No,
Okay.
It's just going to be a board and train, and the training primarily will be obedience type training is our intention.
The field trials and things, especially my daughter does agility, so I know that can get a lot of cars real quick for a weekend or something. So, but y'all aren't planning any?
Yeah, we're not planning on holding anything like that. No events like that.
Great.
Commissioners, anyone else? If not, thank you.
Thank you, guys.
All right, we'll move into public comments, and what this means is that we'll close this session and move into a public comment period, where if you're here to address something on this particular piece of property, that if you want to say either for or against, we ask that you'll come up to the front one at a time to the podium. You'll have 3 minutes. You'll notice there's a timer there. It has red, yellow, and green lights, just like out here on the highway. And it'll tell you when it gets to yellow that you'll have 30 seconds left, and the red light tells you to stop. So we'll ask who is first. Anybody's here to address this to come forward at this time. Don't see anyone coming forward, so I will close the comment period. Commissioners, discussion or a motion? Commissioner Averwater? Is your mic on or is it not working?
I'll second.
We have a motion, Commissioner Averwater, to approve it, and a second by Commissioner Shirley. Further discussion? Call the roll.
Jim Averwater? Yes. Jeff Phillips? Yes. Mike Cush? Yes. Lee Vogel? Yes. Charlotte P? Yes. Trey Gooch?
Yes.
Jim Thompson?
Yes.
Michael Shirley?
Yes.
Jason Beavers? Pettis Reed?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Motion does carry. Moving to item 2, Swanson Development, LP, REZ 25005, location 1011 Manchester Pike. His Commissioner District is Jonathan Beverly. Size of the site is approximately 105 acres. Tax map is 126, parcel 24, 25, 2501, 52, 530, and 5301. Existing zoning is residential median density. Proposed zoning is planned unit development, PUD. Industrial uses, 92.71 acres. And commercial general, CG, 12.51 acres. Mr. DeMasi.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you stated, there are two parts to this rezoning request. The first part is a rezoning of about 12.5 acres along Manchester Pike to commercial general from the currently zoned residential medium density. The remaining 92 acres, 92.5 acres or so, are planned for the planned unit development zoning, which we'll get into here in just a moment. This development will allow for the creation of multiple warehouse distribution buildings to meet the needs of local, regional, and national businesses located in and around the county. This comes right from the pattern book. The rezoning would also create commercial properties along the eastern frontage of Manchester Pike for future commercial, retail, office sites for the property. You can see a concept plan on page 7 of the pattern book. The pattern book has been loaded on your iPads for your convenience and your reference as well. The plan shows approximately 643,500 square feet in 7 buildings, and this is all of warehouse distribution space. The applicant is providing some flexibility for the building sizes, which the total building area would not exceed 700,000 square feet. That's actually listed in the pattern book. Building sizes range anywhere, as you can see on the concept plan, from about 48,000 square feet to about 153,000 square feet. They are proposed to be built in 3 phases, as shown on page 9 of the pattern book, and there's also architectural characteristics, that can be found on page 10. Proposed uses are listed in the pattern book. We did ask for some clarity on that. They have provided that. I think it's in better shape than it was originally. The development shows 2 primary access points to Manchester Pike. They did complete a traffic study, which did recommend turn lanes for both access drives. You can see both of those on the screen. One of them is in the blue right there with a traffic signal on there. Mike's highlighting it. And the other one's in the pink, different phase. That's what you're seeing there. And that new traffic signal is at the entrance across from Warmingfield Drive. If additional access points are proposed, especially from the commercial portion along the property frontage, we would evaluate those at that time. So additional traffic studies may be required. Of course, with any development, engineered site plan would have to be submitted to staff should this application be approved, which would have to demonstrate compliance with all of our regulations. For the landscaping, they are showing a type 3 buffer, which is required between industrially and residentially zoned property. These buffering requirements would take effect should a development plan be approved along with construction. You can see that the buffer is being shown primarily, Mike, can you go to that buffering page? Yeah, right now, or you do that, it's fine either way. Yeah, most of those residential areas to the, I guess that'd be the north in that area, and then to the south as well in that area. Now, you can see there's a good chunk of the land kind of marked as existing wetlands, and there's the stream bed right through there. That's remaining undeveloped. You'll also see to the far right, the step field, that's going to be owned and operated by a consolidated utility district, should this application again be approved. So they are showing quite a bit there of open space, quote-unquote open space. Open spaces really aren't required for non-residential planned developments, but they are showing a good amount of area being set aside for that purpose. Of course, performance standards would also be required to be adhered to in our zoning ordinance regarding noise, dust, and whatnot. We did relay concerns to the applicant regarding the architectural treatments and size of the buildings, especially those closest to the residential areas to the north. You'll see on the northern side of the property, they have one of the larger buildings there, and that's been a concern that we had as far as, they are showing about a separation of about 160 feet or so, excuse me. That back access does have a fire lane behind it, but no truck areas or anything like that. But you can see also the detention field and also the buffer area behind that. Planning Commission may want to seek some additional information on that as far as some additional treatments that might be necessary for those kind of things. So with that, I think Mike's got some comments he'd like to make on. Oh, yeah, thank you. We also had a few outstanding comments regarding just some of the traffic-related and other issues of the pattern book. They did make some, quite a few actual amendments to the pattern book after we sent our original comments to them. Mike, I'll let you handle the traffic stuff if you don't mind. But some of the other things, there's actually on part of this property, I think where the step field is, you can see there's a cemetery back in there, right at the very back, the Henderson Family Cemetery. One of the comments we had to do with the access to that. Of course, there needs to be perpetual access to that cemetery site should any descendants of the family wish to come visit the graves. Right now, there doesn't appear to be any kind of an access easement to that, but one's going to have to be created or something, being that it's on the area where CUD has their step lot. There's have to be some additional conversations on that, so that is something to be concerned about as well. I know that there's some concerns, and this is something that we would probably handle during site plan stage should this be approved, as far as the drainage of the site, where they're showing some of the detention areas may not be the lowest areas on the property. So I think that's something that, again, needs to just everybody to be aware of, that there might be some issues with that, but again, something that can be handled during site plan should this application be approved. I think those were of course, the architectural things, we talked about that a little bit already. Yes, thank you. Yes, you'll see on the pattern book right there, and this was a new addition on the revised pattern book that they did. They're showing that secondary access drive there being a public right-of-way. And if that's the case, that's fine. But the pattern book lists the setbacks being 50 feet from all property lines. We're assuming there would be some sort of a property line there at some point, and that would obviously not be 50 feet from where that right-of-way would be. So that's something I think that needs to be addressed as well. So again, the original pattern book I don't think showed that as a public road, so that was a switch that they did. So with that, I'll turn this over to Mike to take care of any traffic issues and to mention anything I may have missed.
Before we move on, I have one question for you. I'm having a hard time hearing. So, did you just say that where that cul-de-sac is that's showing that it's going to be county road? That will be a.
They're showing it in their pattern book as being a public street, correct?
And it does have the right-of-way dedicated.
Well, they're showing right-of-way now. I mean, it would be dedicated at a future time, but they are showing public right-of-way right there, and that wasn't part of the original pattern book. So.
All right, thank you, Douglas. Like Doug mentioned, the traffic study did indicate the need for a northbound right and southbound left at each entrance. They're calling this entrance A, and this one farther north, entrance B. They are, again, will be installed in phases. Most likely, we're thinking that TDOT will require a full 3-lane section all the way through here. to prevent any kind of weaving in and out with the turn lanes. You do see the proposed traffic signal. They indicate that will be needed. Well, they will install it as warranted, but that will depend mainly on TDOT and when they say it needs to be installed or not. Let's see, what else? The public street that they're proposing will be built to county standards, I would assume, with the full turnaround in the back. Let's see, what else? They will need to do some wetland mitigation for the access to the step lot in the back. Their step field is to the far northeast portion. And as Doug mentioned, they will need access to the cemetery for relatives or anybody else who wants to come to this cemetery. We just can't fence it off and not have it around. So we did make several comments. They've addressed several of them, but some of them will need to be addressed during the site plan phase for construction and design. Let's see, what else? One of the issues that we brought up was the proximity to the residential development to the north. And we did look around and kind of looked at other existing warehouses next to residential developments. And I've got a few examples if you'd like me to kind of see those, kind of what we're looking at. All right. So let me, so there are several in the area. There's one that kind of matches this, kind of same setup. They had like 168 feet from the warehouse building to,
All right.
can't hear? I'm sorry.
Yeah, it sounds like your microphones are working, but they're just not up very loud. I don't know if they
Okay.
can adjust the volume or if y'all can.
OIT, can you help? Yeah, I'll just be right up on it. Okay. So we did find some examples. There's one in Smyrna that's kind of a similar setup. A big warehouse building next to a residential development, and it does have about the same distance. So about 150, 160 feet from what I measured earlier.
Mike, can I ask, which was there first, the warehouse or the homes?
This one, I don't really know. I'd have to go back in time and see, but I do have another example. I knew the homes were there first, a little bit closer to this development. But if you do look at this on Street View, and I apologize, it'll take me a second to get there. Let's see, let me get my bearing. Okay, gotta go north. All right, we're getting closer. So if you look at it on Street View, you can kind of see what the situation we will probably have here. Well, come on. So you've got, the residential development, you can still see the tall warehouse behind it. And so that's one thing that we need to probably talk about tonight is the what you can see from the neighbors' homes and the noise and other items like that. But yeah, you can kind of see it back here. I do have another example. So a little bit closer to the site on Joe B. Jackson. let's see, is the new FedEx warehouse commercial site. Let's see. There we go. So it's about the same distance, but they have a sound barrier wall that they've added to the site, which is about the distance from what they're proposing. So it's a little bit farther. So you can look at, and I'm sorry, this mic is not very good. Yeah, technology is great when it works. Let's see. Okay, there's the FedEx. Okay, right there. So, same kind of situation. You can see the sound barrier wall behind it, and their landscaping in between. So it's this subdivision, the residential section was here, I know, prior to the FedEx, because the FedEx is relatively new. But so that's something we need to address. The let's see. The stream, I think, is listed as an impaired stream, so that'll, when we get to the site plan phase, it'll have special consideration. They are keeping all this a wetland, so it won't impact the stream of what they're doing except for the crossing, and they will have to go through all the state ARAP requirements for that. But other than that, I'm here for questions if you have any.
Can you pull up the flooding map, like the aerial view in?
Yes. So they are. There is some flood on the property and some floodway. This hatched area is the floodway. And then the blue is the 100-year floodplain that we have to deal with. And I think they show that on their pattern book. Let's see. Yeah, they do show the limits of the floodway and the floodplain, the 100-year limits here. And they're keeping out of that except for the crossing to the step field.
The property that's on the other side of the trailer park there, does that property currently drain through this one to get to that creek? Because I know in passing by, when we have a lot of rain, that property floods or holds water, like there's standing water there. Does it pass through?
Let's see. You're talking about this
Yes.
property here?
Correct.
Okay. Yes. Okay. Bear with me.
No worries.
So it does look like, yeah, it kind of drains through here and then back into this. So this is 630, 632. So it is flowing this way towards the tributary. And that would be part of the site plan, review. You have to account for water on your site, but also off-site coming onto your site.
So that person we're not creating a dam that's going to make their problem worse.
Right. That's something we would look at and make sure that it wouldn't, build up a berm or anything just to prevent water from flowing its natural course.
Because they have, so the water from that property would go between the detention pond and the fence row? As I look at this map, as I look at the proposal?
Yeah, that's something that would have to be fine-tuned at the development phase. I mean, I don't know if they'll have to berm up this end closer to the tributary and just let water flow across into the pond and then through the system, or are they going to create something going around? I don't know. You know, there's still a concept.
Let me make sure I understand. Building G neighborhood that's to the north. So there will be a 50-foot landscaping buffer.
Yes, sir.
Designated by kind of a yellow-green color there.
Yes, sir.
And the darker green is a detention pond, so that'll be open. And then there's a fire access road around Building G, but there's no trucks back there, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Because
That's
I
what
think
they're
I see
showing.
a fire gate on either side of that. So the only time anybody will go back there is a fire truck. The wall of the building, no vehicles back in that area.
That's my understanding, yes, sir.
No loading docks. The loading docks are in the center there in the cross dock area.
Commissioner Cush?
Ooh, I'm hot, I think. So continuing on with Jim's thought process there, on the western side, on the Manchester Pike side, that frontage is deemed future commercial general. So those residents are buffered by the commercial general. Then you have the proposed warehouses, and again, that would be the back side of those warehouses. Traffic and dock space is all centered or conglomerated into the center of the project.
Right, based on this. Now, something about that, and this was something actually I meant to say during my part of the presentation. One of our comments, the original pattern book showed those were the commercial general areas as future commercial. This is part of the rezoning request, so if this does get approved, or regardless if it's deferred, whatever happens tonight, they probably need to change that to proposed commercial general, not future, because it is part of their application as we're considering it tonight, so just something to be aware of.
Okay. So to sum up my comment, it looks like from a industrial lighting and a noise issue, it's all going to be focused opposite the residential and focused in the center of the large acreage or in the large development. Is that a fair statement? The truck noise is concentrated in the center of the project.
Based on what we're seeing, that's what it looks like. Those cross-dock areas, like you said, both toward the northern part of the property and center of the property are both between the buildings.
And
so that's
lighting
correct.
for that would be in that same similar area, would be highlighting the truck traffic and the docks, right?
Correct.
Okay. So noise and light pollution would be limited to the center of the facility.
Now, some of those future commercial areas, I will say this, as far as the planned development portion, you're correct. Now, as far as those future development, or the commercial general areas that they're talking about, the proposed, those would each have their own site plans they would have to come back before us to look at, though they would have their own photometric plans and everything. So what you're talking about is really just for the PUD aspect.
Yeah, and just for everybody's reference, in the book, they've listed potential uses for commercial activities. So that would just be standard business, standard retail type options.
Correct. Now, I will say commercial general also does allow things like car sales and things like that. That's, of the three commercial zones we have, commercial general is the most intense of the three.
I have another question related to traffic on those proposed commercial general spots. Could we require them to go to these, would those potentially use the two exits coming out of this property, or would they each potentially be able to tie into Manchester Highway?
Each application would have its own, I guess, merit, pros and cons. TDOT in their current stance is trying to limit the number of access points, so I would say they would most likely try to use the 2 access points proposed for this industrial part of it.
Are we able to make that a part of our comments, or does TDOT totally in control of that?
We have the ability to make those comments, yes, but it's ultimately their road, so they have the final say on that. They do listen to us and do require that the local jurisdiction make recommendation and approval. So if you remember the subway on Shelbyville Pike, we allowed an entrance on Shelbyville Pike and Ellis Drive. It was a corner lot, and we thought it was all right to have the 2 entrances. Well, TDOT said, no, you've got 1 entrance on Ellis. We don't want an entrance on Shelbyville Highway. So they trumped us and said, you're just getting 1 entrance.
And you made the comment, I believe, if I heard correctly, you made the comment that you thought that TDOT would require them to have 3 lanes for the whole length of the project?
Yes.
Is that also something that we could say we want?
Well, yes, we can ask for that too, but ultimately it goes back to TDOT's requirement. I can't recall if we had, we did discuss it with a earlier preliminary meeting with TDOT, and they have it depends on what the ultimate distance between the turn lanes are, the approach tapers, the points of them. So if they are within, I think, 350 feet or less, they make it required a full 3-lane section.
And my last question on the traffic, I think, I may reserve some for later, but if I understand correctly, on the long-term transportation plan, this stretch of Manchester Highway all the way to Joby Jackson is slated to be widened. Does this project dedicate right-of-way on their side, or are we going to have a mess going in later to try to fit all that in, or does it already exist that way?
I believe it already exists. Let me measure real quick. Yeah, it's got 80-plus feet, so they do have additional room. They might have to switch to a curb and gutter section to get, all the lanes in there.
I'm sitting here doing a lot of listening. Is this thing working? Is it all right? Looks like from looking at this, and I know we got one that canceled tonight. My phone rung off the wall on that other one. And I think what I'm seeing here is I'm not seeing industry along that side of the road. That's what I heard. Folks out that way are concerned about big buildings looking like I-840 along Manchester Highway. All that stuff about the water and that kind of stuff really is irrelevant, I think, for what we're trying to do. We're trying to decide whether or not we're going to change the scope of what that area, the highway is going to look like, or at least that's the message I got. So I hope if some folks have different ideas that live out that way, I hope they're here. I hope they're willing to voice their concerns. But I'm seeing a total change of landscape out there with this type of development. Traffic count. Mike, I was looking at traffic count. It says from last year to this year, we're down, or last 2023 to 2024, states come in with a 7% decline in traffic. What in the world's going on?
You have to look at an overall trend. It's up and down. If you look at TDOT traffic counts, they're up and down, but they're generally an incline.
Yes, I don't think I've seen that big a drastic change in that. So I don't know. I'm just seeing a difference in the scope of landscape out there if this is where we're heading. And I think that this one, if the folks out that way don't seem too concerned about this one, then the next one's going to be easier, and the next one will be a little bit easier. So I'll just keep listening.
Commissioners, any more questions? If not, I'll ask that the applicant come forward.
was just going to say that Matt was here. Okay. So he just muted out.
I'll let you introduce yourself, Matt.
Thank you, Planning Commissioners. I'm Matt Taylor of SCC. We're located 850 Middle Tennessee Boulevard here in Murfreesboro. I've also got my applicant, Mr. Joe Swanson Jr., and a couple members of his family with him as well. Going back to the most recent comments on kind of changing the landscape, it is definitely a change of use that has been out here along this segment of Manchester Highway. But I would say that, some of this change has started probably 15 years ago, or is envisioned. If you look directly to the south and east, the Jones family, there's a large, I think it's about a 600-acre PUD that's been zoned in the city for a while. Now, they're not ready to develop. I don't know when that will be ready, but, whenever Joe B. Jackson gets extended through, I think we'll see a revision to that PUD. And I think that some of that landscape will start to change with that. At the intersection of Joe B. Jackson and Manchester Highway, we've got some smaller commercial users there, which I think will, start to complement. Those are some of the same type users that we would see on the front of our property, very service-oriented. You're not going to see another Dollar General, but something like a Dollar General or a daycare. Those sorts of services, we think, along the front of our site here, and not have to drive all the way into Rutherford Boulevard inside the city of Murfreesboro to obtain those services. So I think those would be, at the end of the day, those would be viewed as amenities for the overall area. As far as the examples that were put up, I think that we can point to very specific things that are different about those sites, and some of those sites are why we designed our site the way that we did. We very purposefully turned our buildings and those truck courts internal to the property, as I think somebody pointed out. Our buildings are much shorter than those. The scale of our buildings is much smaller. Those buildings are probably minimum 500 to 1 million square feet. Probably at a minimum 40 or 45 foot clear, which makes them between 50 and 60 feet tall overall. We're setting our maximum building height at 40 feet, which will have a pitch to it. So more residential in nature. We did commit, based on our last neighborhood meeting, we moved that northern building, I think we call it Building G, we moved it about 3 times as far from the property line, and we committed that back road would only be fire. And then we said the only lights we'll have back there are the ones that code requires over the doors themselves due to the concerns from our neighbors there. And so we've tried to be very intentional about the way we design this. It does change the land use in the area, but we need industry, we need places for people to work. Mr. Swanson is building some buildings similar to this over on Logistics Way. You'll see the same building materials, the same building heights, and very similar distances from property lines to existing residential. Some of that development along Joe B. Jackson, it's called Parkway Place. Some of that has some distances as narrow as 25 feet. Other places we preserved, upwards of 50 to 100 feet of tree row. And so here we committed to not touching at least 25 feet along that whole northern property line, and then we'll add additional materials on top of that. In addition to the distance to the building, which is about 175, I think we call it out at 168 feet between the property line and that Building G right now. And if you go look at those buildings on Logistics Way, or if we pull them up on the GIS, you'll see that the scale and the preservation of those trees, it helps. It's very much a different situation than the two examples put up on screen. Those had their truck courts facing the neighbors, didn't preserve trees, had very small tree plantings today. In the future, those tree plantings will be larger, but they will always have that heavy truck presence on the side of the neighbors. Ours will not have that ever, based on this PUD. As far as the questions along Manchester Highway, we've had our preliminary meetings with TDOT. I think 2 we've had there. We've had those traffic studies completed. the access points for those future commercial, TDOT has become very, very stringent on those access points. I think that we're likely to see very few access points granted from those. We'd like to leave the opportunity open to have some. We want those users to be successful, and if we're going to have to build a 3-lane section between there, our businesses should be able to utilize that 3-lane section. Otherwise, I'm not sure what the 3-lane section is for besides to minimize some weave. Those would wind up being shared accesses. Our rear drive that's going to be shared with industrial, that will be shared with the commercial so that we can all access that internally, and they'll have access back to that signal. Access to the cemetery, we understand that. We will fully coordinate that with CUD during construction plans, exactly how they want that to look and what satisfies their requirements. We have no problem with that. We know that that's on the radar. Same thing with stormwater. We never have, and we will not create a dam with the neighbor. And so the water that comes from the west will continue to flow to the west. I don't know whether it'll go into our detention pond. I think we'll probably route it around, is my gut, just to keep that water separate. But we will absolutely accommodate that water so it continues to flow to the stream.
Matt, I have a traffic question.
Yes, ma'am.
So these are going to be 18-wheelers
Yes,
going
ma'am.
in and out
Yes,
on
ma'am.
Manchester Highway.
Yes, ma'am.
Even if you do a 3-lane, it's going to come out in traffic and go to Joe B. Jackson to the interstate, right?
Yes,
so
ma'am.
You're adding 18-wheelers coming in on Manchester Highway to go to Joe B. Jackson to get to the interstate in all-day traffic. The school is close by, correct? How far away is the school?
It's a decent distance south of Joe B. Jackson right there, because I drive, this is how I come to work, is up the Manchester Highway every
But
day.
school traffic is
There's some traffic, I'm sure, will go south there.
I have a hard time with putting 18-wheelers in the middle of all these subdivisions close to a school when I think this should be closer to the interstate.
The property is not there closer to the interstate. Both Manchester Highway and Joe B. Jackson are classified as major arterials, both by the city as well as by the county. And that is what those are intended for, is to convey traffic back to our even bigger conveyances, being the interstate. And so that's what the major arterials are intended for. And so I think if I was trying to dump this traffic on Dilton-Mankin, I would 100% agree with you, Ms. P. But our major arterials, that's where our heavier vehicles are supposed to access those.
So Matt, how far is it from this property, Joe B. Jackson?
I would say from our southern end, about 1,200 feet. And so from so 1,600 feet to our southern exit point there. And we don't none of these cross in front of another subdivision except for Warmingfield Drive.
That's not where the entrance and exit to the property is, not that close to Joe B. Jackson. I mean, you have one light, but the light goes into the subdivision.
Yes, ma'am. I'm saying our southern entrance is about 1,600 feet from the signal at Joe B. Jackson, and then there's about 1,000 or 1,100 feet between our two entrances. So maybe there's 2,300 feet to the most northern access point, plus or minus. I don't have the measurement here, but just going off the scale of the drawings.
Other questions, commissioners?
Mr. Chairman. Matt, on building G,
Yes, sir.
does it have roll-up doors in the back, even though that's a fire lane?
No, sir.
So there will just be single man doors.
That are emergency code required doors only.
But
That's
there's
right.
no roll-up doors
Zero.
that will go up to let air in or
Right.
anything like that?
That's
Okay.
right. Zero.
And, okay.
Yes, sir.
Other questions?
I do think there was a question about the floodplain and floodway. All those are shown on the concept plan, and you can see we have basically avoided almost the entire floodplain and floodway except for where we cross over to get to the step field. And so those are black lines. Both of those are black lines on those concept plans.
For your future commercial,
Yes, sir.
you think that, I know that it's future, there's no plan necessarily what those buildings might look like, but you would anticipate that all of those would have access to your 2 exits so that they could go to a light?
We'll require them, we will dedicate the easements for those, absolutely.
To get to the two
Yes.
existing ones?
Yes.
One which would, and then that middle one, they would be able to drive through from one end to the other and stay on the property until they got to a road that would get to a light or an
Yes.
improved intersection?
Yes, sir. We'll dedicate access easements so that each one of those, basically you can drive through the whole park if you want to call it that, absolutely.
I can understand your request of like one or the other, like 3-lane improvement or limited access, but I just wanted to make sure we have.
Other questions for the applicant? If not,
Thank you.
thank you, Matt. All right, we're going into the public comment period. And this is the same way as what I said before. And just a reminder that you have 3 minutes, and we ask that you stay with that. And when the red light comes on, please step down. First, I believe we already got somebody standing up ready to come this way. We need your name and address so that we'll have it on record here. And
My name is Laura Jones, and my address is 180 West Big Richland Road, Waverly, Tennessee, 37185. But the land...
please.
Oh,
use
I'm
the
sorry.
microphone.
Hi, thank you all for everything you do. I'm excited about the growth of Murfreesboro. It's my hometown. And you mentioned the Jones Foundation land. This was the layout for it. Sorry I didn't have media for you. I've got old school. But this was back in the day where we kept it classy. So I do have a number of concerns. The Swanson property retains water. And when you build up the area for the warehouses, it's going to displace the water. And it's going to displace it on the acreage that I and my family own. And so, you know, this is not long for it, especially if we run Joby Jackson through there. And it'll be a nice, planned, classic design that would be very becoming for the neighborhood. And I just wanted to express the concerns I have for the residences like yours, and I hope you get up and talk. But that water is going to be displaced. That concept, it doesn't look like it has enough holding tank, because every dump truck of soil you bring in, you're going to have to, that's going to displace the water flow back on the west side, and particularly maybe even the residential side. So let's give this some really grave decision-making. Take a look at the whole ramifications for all the areas, for all the homes, for the future developments, what it's going to look like down the line. Again, I'm not opposed to development. Love it. Murfreesboro's great, it's fast-growing. Let's do it right, though. That's all I ask. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next? Anyone? Come ahead. Act like you're at Walmart. Push your way in.
If you can pull your mic down.
3812 Manchester Pike.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman and members of the Planning Commission, I thank you very much for this opportunity to just share some thoughts. I certainly understand that Murfreesboro, Rutherford County is changing. We've built our home there 48 years ago, so we've seen a lot of changes. I can tell that Mr. Swanson has put a great deal of time and effort into trying to do something that it's going to mitigate some of the issues he's got. But I will share with you, and the thought that was mentioned, which was actually one of the thoughts I had, we have no warehouses on this side of the Manchester Pike. This is new. This is new ground. And I know things can't always stay the same, but I also know that Murfreesboro, Rutherford County, we do strive to create a better quality of life for all of our citizens. And we've got Joe B. Jackson. We know that that is an industrial area that's been designated. It's been built there. We understand that. But for us, we have people who are in the Sugar Bush area, the Lavender. We have people down the Manchester Road like us that have been there a long, long time. And if you look at where you're going from where you are zoned now, if you look at the land use plan going from residential medium to where this is going to take it, where we're going to end up with a mini industrial park on the Manchester Pike. And I don't know where that data came from relative to the traffic, but I can tell you we struggle so much, as we are right now, to get out of our driveway. I will tell you, I sit there sometimes and I'm doing this, just this. I can't imagine putting big trucks in there, these 18-wheelers. We see this so much because there's wrecks on the interstate, and the first thing, because we have all of these exits that funnel off that you can get to the Manchester Pike, and we look out, and in front of our whole, it's like a parking lot, and I'm thinking, oh dang, I can't even get out of my driveway. I've got a doctor's appointment, so I have to turn around and go back in, get on the interstate, go all the way back, just to try to get around. I can't imagine what this is going to be like when you put additional 18-wheelers going down. I'm sorry, I can tell my time is up. I want to thank you so much for letting me just share my thoughts, and just ask that you do just walk through this as residents, as we are, and just thank you.
Thank you. Next.
I'm Don Williams. My wife, that was Donna back here. She won't come up here with me. We live at 3759 Manchester Pike, which is right at the edge of all this starting. We've been there 4 years. Yeah, we get water when in the backyard. We're sitting on 5 acres, but we get water back there already from a heavy rain. And we found out since this is back in there is wetlands. I also found out that Lyle Creek don't even flow. It's just sitting there adding more water every time it rains. I don't know what the problem is there, but it's another problem for Murfreesboro. My concern, just like she's got through saying, the traffic. It don't bother me as much in this thing being built in my backyard, just about, but it's the traffic. I've sat there, I don't know how many times. We've been here 4 years, that's all. And we've seen the traffic double since then. I do the same thing. I come out to get out my driveway, forget it. You sit there and wait. But when the traffic gets backed up on the interstate, she's exactly right. It comes right down through Manchester Pike to try to find another way to get back to the interstate. So I'm not against progress. I just don't think it needs to be done in our backyard or for the whole neighborhood there. And I thank you for my time.
Thank you, sir.
About 3 minutes. I'm going to run through these because I've made notes on things that I've heard from you guys and from the gentleman that spoke that's representing Swanson. My first concern, I don't have school-age children, but my first concern are the children in that neighborhood. I realized when you brought up, and also I think you did, about how the buildings are going to be facing inward. So yeah, that will help us. However, you're still looking at the tractor trailers, you're looking at tow motors, whatever they're going to have back there. I'm a great-grandmother, and I like my sleep at night. So then my other question is your hours of operation. At one time, we were told that that could be, hours of operation could be at a decent time when the hours would cease, the operating hours would cease. Okay, so we've got our school-age children, we've got the noise, we've got the lights. I know the lights are going to be downward, and we're not going to have any street lights out there. We've got school-age kids. My heart goes out to them. So the other thing is the flooding, the holding ponds. And I was talking to the lady that spoke earlier. How will you guarantee that's not going to cause more water in my backyard, 3759, the one that's on the corner? We already sometimes look like an island sitting out there. Okay, so hours of operation I talked about. Can they guarantee us that those buildings operation will cease at a decent hour? Traffic in that area, you're talking about a 3-lane. You're talking about a 3-lane there. How far down is that 3-lane going to run? Because you've got another community, Crescent community, I think, coming in down there. That's going to give you more traffic on that road, on top of the subdivisions that are on the other side of W. Jackson coming in. The 3-lane that you're talking about is going to give us a turning lane, but that turning lane, you might as well not even have it. How is it going to be used? Because all the traffic is getting so heavy now. At times, you can sit out there and literally they're bumper to bumper out there. And if you come out there at a good, busy time, and you'll see that for yourself. Getting in and out, Sherry had mentioned that. Getting in and out is very difficult. The cul-de-sac that you mentioned, there was an entrance or something there at a cul-de-sac. What is that going to be used for? Is that going to be for the people that work there? Is that going to be used? So now you're going to disrupt that neighborhood for that. The 50-foot versus 150 feet at the other warehouse. Why do we get less than what the other warehouses are getting? And I know I've got 3 seconds. This is a residence. They need to think about us.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Commissioners, Joe Swanson, 3614 Manchester Pike. I'd like to address a couple of items that were brought up. When I was a child, 60 years ago, we started building buildings on Park Avenue. Park Avenue at that time was in the county. I remember playing at the city limit sign on Park Avenue on the north end. Growth is coming. The detention ponds are made to control the runoff before, as though it were post-construction. So there should not be any additional impact. The flows should be the same. The wetlands have been delineated with the Corps of Engineer and TDEC. There's a mitigation plan right now at TDEC going through the review process. The panels on the buildings are embossed to look like stucco, but they have a 30-year warranty. As mentioned before, the lighting on the backs of the buildings will only be as code requires for emergency egress man doors. I've just finished 400,000 square feet. 100 of that was in Smyrna, and another 300 was here. If all of the calls that I have had since the first of the year, with some of whom we are now working with, even have LOIs working, if half of them came through, all of those buildings would be filled. As I was growing up, my father and grandfather always instilled in me to find a need and fill the need. And that is what the Swanson family is trying to do. We have found a need in this community to provide warehousing and manufacturing space because the calls indicate that we need more warehousing space. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Not seeing anyone, we'll stop the comment period. It's over. Commissioners? Sure is now. Mr. Shirley.
I have a question as it relates to first responders, if our Chief Sanders can help us here. Is our county fire department, are we totally prepared for warehousing and responding to what may be in these, what's approved for this type of warehousing? Like what could, the activities taking place inside?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Yes, we are, especially with the expansion of the county fire department in the last several years, we're definitely prepared to handle that. In addition, these buildings will be required to have a number of fire code and building code requirements, up to including access, fire protection systems, alarms, ingress, egress. Anything you can think of, these buildings will have to meet all those requirements, which of course will aid in handling anything that might go on in those facilities.
And as one of our speakers mentioned, the Jones property does have a PUD in place. It's already annexed by the city. Does keeping this in the county versus having this be annexed by the city and being a city project, does that cause any concern for you or confusion for first responders or 911 services?
No, sir. Given the information that we've received to this point, obviously the technology that the dispatch centers have will easily be able to delineate responses based on jurisdiction. Additionally, with the inclusion of that public right-of-way, which I assume, as mentioned, would be a public street, which would also aid in identification of location that needs to be responded to.
I am going to go back to traffic again here. I was looking at, as the speakers were talking and thinking about those two exits, we just have one that's identified as needing a stoplight, Mike. Can you tell me why it was put there? I assume it's because it's opposite of the neighborhood, which I can tell you we need a light there anyway. But what about, why do you think, or is there not a light at the other one? Because tractor trailers exiting, I do worry that if we do approve this, that tractor trailers are going to come to that exit, and that is going to be dangerous not to have a light. And I'm not sure, in looking at this plan, I've never driven a tractor trailer, but I don't know that I would go through all of those parking areas to get to the light. So can you tell me about like what would necessitate a light at both entrances?
Sorry, it would have to meet the warrant analysis of the traffic study. So the turning movements of the trucks coming out and the opposing traffic, that's something that we could look at again at that third phase or the second phase, I think, when it comes online. Let's see. Yeah, that's going to be installed at the second phase, this pink area. So that's, again, we'll have another chance to look at it. Has the background traffic grown sufficiently enough to, impede trucks coming out? But that's something that we would look at again.
Are there any design features? I'm thinking about if this goes all the way to phase 3. Do you all look at design features that would encourage trucks to go to the light? If we only got one light, that we would get all of those truck traffic to go to the light?
when we, as an example, when we looked at, and this was before you were on the commission, there was a industrial type development at the I-840 interchange with Sulphur Springs Road, and some of the design features they incorporated as part of their plan development did just that. Now, that's not necessarily being shown here, so I think that's something that if you'd like to see something like that, then that probably needs to be part of the pattern book, not left to chance later.
And also remember that you have a traffic signal at Dilton Mankin and also at Joby Jackson, so that will break up the flow as well. But again, it's not enough for much traffic coming in or going. Yeah.
Mr. Chairman.
Is that better?
Lots better.
I believe the city of Murfreesboro owns property pretty much surrounding this or adjacent to this. Is that correct? Or it's zoned by the city of Murfreesboro. Is that correct?
Yes.
Do we have any idea what their comprehensive plan suggests that property be used for? Have we talked to Murfreesboro about?
Right. Well, we sent a copy of this pattern book actually to Murfreesboro City when it came in. Can you hear me? Jeff, can you hear me? Okay. Yeah, I did send a copy of this pattern book. I didn't get any comments back from them. So as far as any concerns that they may have, nothing was relayed to me to include with the staff report.
Just thinking about what we're doing, and would this particular rezoning in this particular area be conducive to our comprehensive plan? Is this an area that we're looking to expand from a commercial or industrial perspective on our comprehensive plan? Is it?
Yeah, I don't think this was necessarily identified as one of the nodes necessarily. Now, of course, the area around Joby Jackson, I mean, is already existing like that. Is there the ability for that to expand? I mean, realistically, I think there is. Now, does that necessarily mean that every property around here is going to automatically be zoned that way? Not necessarily. So I will say that our current comprehensive plan does show this being within the general urban character area, which it does anticipate future non-residential, more intense type non-residential growth, excuse me. But again, there's a timing element involved with all of that. Doesn't necessarily mean just because it's identified that way that every property has to be zoned. So that's why we have this process here. So to answer your question, I guess the long way, this wasn't identified specifically as a node. I will say the Manchester Pike is identified as an urban style corridor, similar to the general urban area, which does anticipate those more intense type developments.
Any feedback from the county commissioner in that area at this point in time?
I've had some brief conversations with him about this, but nothing that I can recall that I would share tonight. And
what we're looking at today is this proper zoning for this piece of property. We've got a concept plan, but everything from an engineering perspective, traffic, water, all of those would be worked out and finalized as we get into the site plan. Is that correct?
Correct. And I will say, actually, I meant to mention this earlier during my presentation, that as far as the septic needs, of course, they are proposing a step system to be owned, operated by CUD. However, they don't have a will serve letter at this point, and the reason being is because of the fact that, the users still really aren't known necessarily. They've got the type of businesses identified. They do have a water will serve letter, but that's not terribly uncommon since, this is speculative to some extent. Of course, they do have a planned development pattern book. They will be bound by that, but as far as actual users and things, so there is a little bit of unknown as far as that goes. They probably don't have specific users, and that we knew that going into it. So that is something just to kind of piggyback on what you were saying. If this were to be approved, ultimately, they're going to have to come back, and they're going to have their will serve letter from their sewer. All this is going to have to be taken care of from the drainage, the traffic, and everything else. Yes.
Thank you.
Jug, the blueprints or that the one speaker put up, I've seen those because I was very interested. I built a business in this area and was looking at that. There's no industrial in all of that yellow on that side of the road. I mean, this is way different than everything that's proposed there. Not that then like the presentation said, it could be changed by the time they start actually building it. But do you have a copy of that plan?
I don't have.
Okay,
no, sir.
and I don't know that it's appropriate to use that for this application, to put them up against each other, but it's certainly, industrial is certainly not, there's nothing on that side of the road, and it's certainly not up against a neighborhood in that area. Which is one of the things that's causing me great pause. If this was all commercial offices and small retail shops and things, I wouldn't have a problem with it at all. It's the fact that we're talking about tractor trailers and warehouses. I know Swanson's properties, the warehouses that they're building along Joby Jackson look good. They're not, and I almost would rather, me personally, would rather back up to a warehouse than a bunch of houses, that in this area. So I'm torn as we look at these things, but the traffic is a concern, and the industrial is a major concern of mine as well.
Well, make sure I understood, sitting here listening, we got a 2-lane road out there right now. And I keep hearing about a 3-lane road. I didn't hear we're getting a 3-lane road. We might, if necessary. So that means any tractor trailer that pulls out of there trying to switch gears, it's going to be a minute. All I got to say.
Anyone else? Your time right now is questions, comments, or a motion.
So, Doug, state that has this, says in the introduction here, it's slated to be expanded to a 5-lane roadway. Is that in the state's plan or our plan?
Well, it's in I believe both Murfreesboro and the county's long-range plans. Now, as far as it's a state road, so it would have to be a state project. I'm not aware that this is actually even on their radar right now. Yeah, it's not on. Mike is saying it's not on their 10-year plan.
So the city surrounds south and the east part of this property and much of the other areas around it. Do they have say-so in that or participation?
Well, as far as zoning approval and site plan approval, those kind of things, no. Now, quite frankly, we probably would, being that, especially with that traffic light lining up with Warmingfield Drive, since that is a city road, we would want their involvement. But as far as the approval process, I don't believe that right-of-way is in the city limits either. I believe it's just the county. So it would be pretty much county looking at that development.
Yeah, I'm just kind of thinking of the expansion of Manchester Pike because I know that and that there is a neighborhood meeting happening on another property that's at the next exit down. It's happening today, and it's kind of in the same situation. It's across Manchester Pike, and I've had some calls on that already. So this is a bit similar in that, although I haven't seen the other one. What I'm told, it sounds like it's going to be kind of the same. So obviously Manchester Pike needs something done to it, especially in these areas around these interchanges. That's where my thought process is. We always said these interchanges should be for trucks to use, so we keep them off the local roads. So I guess I don't have any other further question. I'm just trying to run this through my mind on how we accommodate.
trying to answer your question, I believe.
Yes, sir. Matt Taylor of SEC again. We heard a couple of questions during commissioners talking, and we're perfectly fine with a commitment to a 3-lane section between our 2 entrances and accommodating our left turn lanes there, and perfectly fine making a commitment that we'll do a signal warrant analysis with our last phase, because that'll give us the most opportunity for background traffic as well as our own our traffic to get there. And if it warrants a signal at the other one, we'll install a signal at the other one. I mean, we're not trying to get out of anything that our property is going to impact. So we're happy to make both those commitments inside the pattern book for y'all.
Mr. Shirley.
This is a big change for the area, and I would like to know if we could defer this to our next meeting, or do we need a motion? Do we need to vote this up or down?
Now, you can make a deferral even today. That's fine. Now, you can't defer it indefinitely.
Correct. Yeah, I just need to wrap my head around this a little bit more and maybe see if because we haven't talked about hours of operation. We talked about mainly the other things, but I just wonder if we could, I guess that would be I would move to defer this to our next meeting.
Motion made to defer. Do I have a second?
I'd second that.
We have a second.
Mr. Chairman, may I just...
Discussion.
Mr. Chairman. May I? Thank you. Can you give staff a little direction and the applicant a little direction as far as the kind of things you'd like?
I would be happy to.
I mean, deferring for the sake of deferring is one thing, but if we've got some specific things for us to look at.
I will lay out my concerns and open to any other concerns that commissioners may have. One is about hours of operation for truck traffic in that area. I don't even know if that's something we can restrict, but that would be something that I heard from the neighbors and I would be interested to hear the developer's response to that. Number 2, and I think Matt just addressed it, the 3-lane, just to look at TDOT and talk about what traffic improvements really need to be made in order to not have this be a negative impact on Manchester Pike. So whether that be the 3-lane, we requested that. Could we make that a requirement of this development? Would they be willing to do that? Which sound like they are, but just to have that in writing or whatnot, or limit access. I would the design features to be included in this pattern book that would encourage all traffic to go to the light, the stoplight, and I would like to make sure that that stoplight is included 100%. Like this doesn't go anywhere without that light being a part of this. There has to be at least one traffic light, in my opinion, to exit this development to Manchester Pike. Those are the, and then again, just the flooding. But my understanding is that they are required not to negatively impact their neighbors, and they are required by law to capture and retain the water that falls on this property. Period. Okay. So those are my main reasons. And then the industrial thing, that's just something I have to think about. That's nothing probably you can help me with. But those are the main concerns that I have that would make that a lot easier for me.
Okay. Let me, and I've written all that down. I think that Matt and Joe Swanson Jr. back there have heard that too. Let me just mention one thing about hours of operation. I understand where you're coming from. From an enforcement standpoint, that's going to be very difficult for staff to do. So regardless of what they come up with, because we're not going to have people out there, let's say the hours are, let's just throw it out there, 6 a.m. to midnight or something like that. You know, if somebody's out there at 12:30 a.m. and they're still working, there's no way we're going to know that. So, and even if we did know that, how are we going to enforce that? I don't know. So just be aware of that.
Okay. Further discussion? Commissioner Beavers.
Could we also check with the city and their land use plan?
Yes, sir.
I think on that, Doug, as far as me seconding it, I feel like the time I'm hearing that they're in agreement with the 3 lanes, the traffic, and I'd say you'd add that before the first truck pulled out. You know, that gets done. That'd be of utmost importance. They did answer the question for me on the warehouse capacity. It didn't surprise me. We don't have the capacity we need in this county. I'm pretty up on that piece of it. I'm just still struggling with, is it the right place? We had a few neighbors here. We didn't have a lot of neighbors here opposing it, the scope of Manchester Highway, so.
And I will say that when the notices went out for this, there were over 140 that we sent out. So
come back.
There was over 140 notices we sent out for this.
Thank you.
I do think, too, myself, about the city's plan that they have there, too. I think that's pretty much.
Yeah, I think that maybe that's something, but Mr. Thompson, too, they did have a community meeting. I attended it, and there weren't any fights, you know, so that was good. You know, but they have addressed some of the concerns that people brought up at that community meeting. So I think they did the right thing by their responding to the concerns from the people in the area.
Okay, we have a motion to defer with a second. Madam Secretary, call the roll.
Jim Overwater? Yes. Jeff Phillips? Yes. Mike Cush?
Yes.
Lee Vogel? Charlotte P? Trey Gooch?
Yes.
Jim Thompson?
Yes.
Michael Shirley?
Yes.
Jason Beavers? Yes. Pettis Reed?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Motion carried.
Mr. Chair, could I add one more little discussion item that may or may not be added to Matt's and Doug's list? I think I heard Matt say that Mr. Swanson would be okay with the 3 lanes between the 2 ingress and egress accesses. I would be curious if we could perhaps get a ballpark number of extending that down to the Joe B. Jackson intersection, and perhaps a shared cost with, you know, the developer, the city, the county, whoever. I'm just curious about what that extra footage would cost to extend that down to Joe B.
It is a 3-lane section from Warming Field, I think, all the way to Joe B.
Okay, so
it already is. It already is at this time.
So where does it drop down to?
So just northwest of Warming Field, it tapers down.
Okay. Okay.
To a 2-lane.
Then I withdraw my question.
Okay. Staff reports and other business.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one item I wanted to kind of bring to your attention. Staff, myself, has been in conversations with the GNRC team regarding Plan Rutherford about the scheduling of the next work session. We were looking at the possibility of maybe not this coming Planning Commission meeting on the the 24th, but on the April 28th meeting. That would give them enough time to get, we're looking at some based on the feedback we got during the last meeting, looking at some different scenarios at some of the land use maps that were there, as well as answering those questions that we received from both the Home Builders Association and the Realtors Association. So if everybody's okay with that, I think that's what I'm sorry. Yeah, it'd be April, I believe, the 28th. That's that last, our normal meeting date. Yes, it'd be April the 28th. So it would just be like we did last time. After our regular meeting, we would just adjourn, and then we would go into the work session for that. So as long as everybody is okay with that, I think that's what we'll shoot for.
Anything else? If not, we're adjourned.